This is accounting spreadsheets, and we're going to be going through assignment 4. We'll go through the classroom assignment 4, and then we will also go through assignment 4's graded. I'll give you some heads up on that since it's a payroll area, and there's a couple really complicated formulas in there. The first thing, though, that we'll do in the class, and I'll go through with you, is pivot tables. Now, pivot tables to me is something that is very useful to people as far as doing pivot tables. We've had a couple people on our advisory committee state to us that they wanted to make sure that we did go through pivot tables, that they are utilizing them in their particular companies. One of the things it's used for is when you have a massive amount of data and you're trying to pull certain things out of it. You're kind of accumulating certain things. Now, you can do that through sorts, and I have a couple of those things out there on the spreadsheet tips area. But pivot table just does it very quickly. I actually did use this in the corporate world. I did this when we had our sales data, and we wanted to pull out certain sales information for a certain division. Now, you could go to programmers and say, program this and do up a report like that. Well, what we did was just dumped all the data into one big Excel spreadsheet, and I just quickly did up a pivot table. It took seconds. So it wasn't getting anyone to program anything or anything like that, because for one, sometimes they get pretty busy in the programming area, and they tell you it'll take umpteen years to get it done. This was just seconds. And you'll see this, going through this exercise, it doesn't take long. This is going to be a very small pivot table, but you can look at it as an example. You could have thousands of lines of information and accumulate those thousands of lines of information very quickly. So we'll get into it. The first thing I like to do is when I'm doing up a pivot table is I like to do it on a separate worksheet. So I'll just leave the data alone. I'll say, okay, that's sitting there in its own little worksheet. I'm going to take this and I'm going to go to sheet 2, and then I'm going to do up my pivot table. Now, to do up a pivot table, it's insert. You have up above, file, home, insert. This is in Excel 2010, by the way. If you are in a different version, you might have to look for it, but I don't think it's too substantially different. I think it might be somewhere close to the insert also. But the insert tab, you can see pivot table right there. So insert pivot table. Now the pivot table basically is going to be asking you, what information do you want to accumulate? What information do you want it to look at to start doing subtotals of different pieces? And so we're going to go to sheet 1, and then I just highlight the area I want the pivot table to look for. And the pivot table has titles up above there, so the pivot table automatically is going to look at those titles and say, okay, here's what we can possibly sort by, is the titles up above. If you have information out there, make sure you put titles up above the first line, so the pivot table knows what to look at. Now, it'll give you an example. Once we hit OK, second thing here, it says, do you want to do this in a new worksheet or existing worksheet? Well, I already went to sheet 2, so I want it in the existing worksheet. And I click OK. And then here's what pops up. And it basically says, okay, here's all the information we have. We have the employee numbers, we have names, we have departments, we have gender, we have salaries, we have bonus. Okay, all the top lines from the database I had. If I just wanted to look at salaries, I would click at that. Now, depending on how you click the information is how the pivot table is going to sort. Which means if I want department and I want genders in department, I'd first click department first. But I'm going to click gender first. We're going to say, okay, how much pay is being paid by all males? How much pay is going to be paid by all females. So I click gender. I'm going to have female, male. Okay, and then I can click salary and bonus. Look at how quick this accumulates information. Isn't it slick? You know, seconds, bang. So in this particular data, right now I know that the salaries, the total female salaries are 238,000, total male salaries are 321,000, the grand total salaries are 559,000. Is that nice information to have? Yeah. See, it's really cool. You get this database and you do up a pivot table, and I can tell bonuses. The female got more bonuses than the male. Hey, what's going on here? They must be working hard. Okay, female have a total of 13,700. Male have a total of 10,600. Grand total bonus is 24,300. Now, I can click on this, and this is where it depends on what order you do it. And I'll show you in the next pivot table. First, I'll go department, and then I'll go gender. But here, first I click gender, and now I'm going to click department within that gender. And it gives me every department for the females. Still the grand total 238,000, bonus 13,700. That didn't change, but now it lists it department by department. I click gender first, so that's the first sort. Department I click second, so that's the second sort. Now I'm going to leave this pivot table alone, and then I'm going to go and now if I wanted to have names, if I click names right now, it would give me every name in accounting, and it would give me every name in finance and every name in payroll. I'm just not going to clutter up the spreadsheet right now with that, but you can do that. Now we're going to go to another brand new spreadsheet, and in the classroom spreadsheet, I'm expecting you to do this both ways. First, we're going to do it up by gender, then we'll do it up by department. Okay, so you guys will show me that you actually know how to do this by each particular method. Again, we're in a brand new spreadsheet. I go insert, pivot table, it says what information do you want? And go to sheet 1, highlight the information. So it knows what information I'm looking for. I want to do it in the existing worksheet, so I'll click OK. That's simple. Pretty much identify what information you want, and then do you want it in that existing worksheet or do you want a brand new worksheet? So, you know, even if I didn't go to a brand new worksheet, I could say I want it in a brand new worksheet and it'd pop up a new worksheet for me. Now, if you notice the first pivot table we went through, we clicked gender first. So we had it all accumulated by female. Now I'm going to click department first. So you notice all the departments click up here, and I'm going to also go salary and bonus. And then I'm going to click gender. So within the accounting, notice how all 4 items are clicked just the same as they were there, but it was the order I clicked the buttons that did the sorting. So if I click department first, it sorts by department first. If I click gender first, it'll sort by gender first and then department, which is very important as far as how do you want to accumulate the information. You can accumulate it many different ways. I think this is really a really cool tool. It's pretty much you go to an IT person and say, just download the information into an Excel file and then I can do whatever I want with it. I can accumulate the information any way I want. And they'll go, oh, how can you do that? You need us programmers to do that. You go, no, I don't. Just download it. Give me an Excel spreadsheet and I can do whatever I want. And you pop up these pivot tables and you can accumulate it. Now, if we look at accounting, in accounting, the females 108,000, males 92,000. The bonus is 9,200 for the female, 4,400 for the male. Each particular department. In finance, there are only females. In marketing, there's only males. So, you know, it lets you know where are the people. So it's a nice way to do it, and you can actually do it both ways, which I think is kind of slick. You know, and if you want, you did it one way and you want to switch it, you can stop and unclick all these buttons and then start sorting it over the way you want. So it does give you some good information. Okay, now this is pivot tables. Make sure you do up the pivot tables. Make sure you're doing it both ways. So I'm going to look at two spreadsheets. I'm going to look at sheet 2 and I'm going to look at sheet 3 and make sure you're accumulating it by female and then department, and then making sure you're sorting it by department and then gender. Okay? So you demonstrate to me you actually do know how to do it both ways. And you do know how to create a pivot table. Like I said, pivot tables, people want to know you understand what this is. So if you go into a company and they say, do you know how to work with pivot tables? You say, yes, I do. You know, you're going to say, oh, I didn't work with it that much, but we went through this in school. I remember how to do it. If I have to, I can pull up Dan's tape again and it'll go through it and show me how to do it. We'll get you through it. So, okay, now I'm going to close this, and then we're going to get into the payroll spreadsheet, which is the graded assignment for 4. Now the payroll has some real funky formulas in it. And I'm going to go through a couple of those funky formulas because you would probably have a pretty hard time creating them all by yourself. A couple things just so you know, some things that have to be done. Medicare has to be rounded. I've had some employees, the biggest points I've taken off in this particular payroll spreadsheet is because people were not rounding Medicare. I don't know how many times I went -1, Medicare was not rounded. You know, -1, and people didn't put in the totals. Make sure you put in the totals down here. Make sure you put in the cumulative totals here. Okay? Now, cumulative totals, some people have a hard time with. They think the cumulative gross pay, they add in the net pay. So I didn't understand why they did that. You know, it says cumulative gross pay, and they add in the net pay. So if you are going to do that, don't do that, because I'll take off. I'm that way. Also, the Social Security is going to have to be rounded. So, and then you're going to have an if statement inside an if statement, which really makes it funky. A couple things, plus you'll be taking formulas and copying them down. Couple spreadsheet tips out here that are useful for you in this particular spreadsheet. You go to the spreadsheet tips and there's absolute formulas. Make sure you look at that spreadsheet tip. There's a rounding spreadsheet tip. Make sure you look at that one. And there's an if statement spreadsheet tip. Make sure you look at that one. 3 different spreadsheet tips to look at that you will be utilizing in this particular spreadsheet. So if you know how to do that, you say, oh, I know how to do the rounding, or I know how to do the if statements, or I know how to do absolute formulas. Fine. Don't worry about it. But you might want to look at it anyhow because I might elaborate a little more. I might give you some little trick that you haven't seen before. So go out there and look at it. If nothing else, you get to spend more time looking at my videos, and that's always an enjoyable thing to do, right? Anyhow, I'm going to go through the Social Security if statement because that one is real funky. The union dues one, I don't think that's that complicated of an if statement. It pretty much says if this coordinate equals Y, put down $25. Okay? They tell you the union dues are $25. I don't know if they state that, but I'll just tell you right now, it's $25. I think that's in the textbook. So if the union dues is yes, it's saying take $25 out of there. If no, or if it equals Y, $25. If not, zero. Because if it's not a yes, that means it's a no, and that means it should be zero. Okay. Social Security, that is one semi-difficult formula. It is probably the longest formula you will have to do in this class. So I'm going to go through the first one. Some of the things you'll have to demonstrate, unless you want to retype it in each one of these. If you want to copy it down, you're going to have to do absolute values on some of these things. So that's going to be a challenge by itself. You know, if you look at it logically, what is Social Security? Well, it says if your gross wages are above $106,800, you will have zero Social Security taxes. If your wages are below $106,800, you have to go times 6.2%. Okay? Well, you know, that's real easy for some people, like for Miller and Smith. Their gross wages are only $15,000 or $6,550. You look at that and you go, well, for sure their wages are below the $106,800. It's just going to be times 6.2%. But you don't know in a spreadsheet when their wages will get above this level. So you have to put in the formula saying, hey, I got to check for this. I got to know, is it going to be larger or smaller? So what happens is, since it's a certain dollar amount that cuts off, you're going to have if statement saying, if it's over 106,800, put down zero. If it's not, then you have another if statement. If my gross wages plus my current wages is over 106,800, then take my 106,800 minus my gross wages before this payroll and take it times the 6.2%, only the difference. Because at that point in time, then you'll be above it. Real funky if statements. And we'll go through that. This is going to be one long if statement. I hope I don't do it wrong or I'm going to blow up my spreadsheet. First thing I'm going to do is check to make sure my spreadsheet is not protected. And it's not. If it was protected, it would right here say unprotect spreadsheet. Since it's protect spreadsheet, that means I click on this and then it would be protected, then I wouldn't be able to enter anything. So I'm okay. I'm raring to go. Okay. Now Jones. And Jones is going to be one of these where this thing's going to count. This thing's going to get funky. Because Jones is at 105,000. Made 9,000. So at the end of this, Jones is at 114,000. Well, really only $1,800 of Jones' pay should be deducted for taxes. And then again, I want rounding. So remember, rounding has to be done both on Social Security and Medicare. Unless you want me to take off a point, which I'd do that. So look at that. But Social Security, here's the statement. It's equals, round, and then we're going to have a bracket, and then we're going to have an if statement, IF. This is not one if, it's IF. And then we're going to have another bracket. And we're going to say I-13. I-13 right now represents this 105,000. If I-13 is greater than G25. So if I13 is greater than G25, put down 0, no taxes. Then I'm going to have a comma, which means if it's not, if it's less than that, then I get to go into another if statement. Told you this would be funky. If, and here we got a double bracket. If C13 plus I13, bracket, is greater than again G25, comma. So it says if I add these together, it's going over the limit. If that is true, then here's what we're going to put down there right now. And then in this case, it is true. So in this case, then we're going to go bracket G25 minus I13 bracket times G23. Okay? Comma. So that says if that's true, here's what you're going to do. If that's true, I'm going to take the 106,800, I'm going to subtract the 105,000, and then I'm going to take that times 6.2%. In fact, that is what's true. And it's saying if it wasn't true, that means that adding those two up were less than 106,800, which just means all I have to do at that point in time is go C13 times G23. Now here's what I really like is when you're doing these real long formulas, you got to, this has happened to me. How many brackets do I really need? And I need 2 brackets right here. And then I'm going to go a comma, and this is for the rounding. I'm going to put in 2, which means I'm rounding to 2 places. I'm not going to show cents. I'm going to show, or I'm not going to have it more than 2 decimals in the cents area. And then I'm going to hit one more bracket, and then I'm going to cross my fingers. I'm going to hit enter, and hopefully I get a number. And I did get a number. And the number, and here is where you always want to check things. If you take 1,800 and you take it times 6.2, gives you 111.6. And so that's what this is. So your Social Security is 6.2. Does that make sense? So you look at this, and that is how you handle this particular formula. That is a real funky formula. Now, to show you the rounding, if I change the rounding, and we'll go in here and we'll go, instead of, well, I'm going to not change the formula, but I want to change the format and make this all cents. And I do want these to all be in cents, the dollars for the net present value. And this gets into, again, how do you change formats? If you highlight this area, I'm going to highlight all of this area, and I'm going to format these cells. So I right-click. And once I right-click on it, I will say I want numbers, and I want those numbers to go 2 places. Not just 0 places, 2 places. And that makes it 111.60. Okay? And I'm going to hit OK. Now all of these, it won't be $112, it'll be $111.60. And for payroll, I think we want to go with cents. So make sure you change this particular spreadsheet to make sure you have it set up where you are taking care of this, where it has the cents down there. It'll give you good practice for doing this. Again, how do I do this? I highlight the area I want to change. On my mouse, I'm going to right-click. Right-click I love because I can, from there, I can copy, I can paste, I can delete, I can clear content. But on here, I'm formatting cells. Once I hit format cells, then what I can do is I can do a number format, alignment, font, border, fill, protection. Okay? So it allows you to do a lot of different things. And here I'm doing the number, and I make it a number, and I make it 2 places. Now I also could click the comma, saying if it's over 1,000, it'll put a comma in there. And I think I'll do that too, although none of these, well, the net pay might be over 1,000. So we'll click that too to make sure we have a comma separation in the thousands. Easier to look at numbers that way. Make sure you format your spreadsheets. And a lot of people in this class, when you're sending me a spreadsheet, I'll get some people that, yeah, they put in all the right formulas, but their spreadsheet looks kind of bad and crappy. You know, it's not formatted the same, it's not shaded the same, it won't have, you know, the same highlights. Try to make your spreadsheets look pretty. You know, if someone's benefit of the doubt, if they're on the borderline of what grades, and they always gave me spreadsheets that look pretty, I'm going to use that for, yes, you get the benefit of the doubt. If you give me spreadsheets that look ugly, I'm going to say, you know, this person really didn't take pride in what they were doing anyhow. And that's some of it is when I'm presenting a spreadsheet to someone, I want to take pride in the spreadsheet I give them. I always try to make sure my spreadsheets look nice, that when I gave it to someone, it was easy for them to read. Because that's what it's all about. We're in the information business, and we want to make sure the spreadsheets are easy to read. Now, once I have this formula, I cannot copy this formula straight down. If I do, I'm going to get a whole bunch of weird numbers. If I do this, just to give you an example, I copy this way down, I'm going to get zeros all over the board. Why? Because it's going to change some of these formats. Some of these formats need absolutes. If you don't know how to do that, go look at the spreadsheet tip and it'll show you. And then you have to logically go through here and say which ones need an absolute. Does the I-13 need an absolute? No, it doesn't, because that one will always change. If I go and copy it one down, I really want it to be I-14. Does the G25 need an absolute? Yes. Does the C13 need an absolute? No. I-13? No. The G25 does. The G23 does. And let's see. Oh, you're going to have one more G23, and that will need an absolute too. And then when you do an absolute, you got to say, well, do I do a freeze of the G or do I do a freeze of the 23? That's a thought process you have to get through. So this is going to give you good practice on doing up the absolutes too. If you're not sure on it, again, go and review it under the spreadsheet tips.